Hi, I'm Joshua Ponsafo of the New African Concept. I believe strongly that you've been blessed so far with the various episodes of the Voice of Reformation. And I'm very much excited to inform you that with the next 3 months ahead, February, March, and then April, there is a special package in the area of apologetics. I know you have several questions on your mind, and so do I. For the month of February, we'll be considering the subject area of the Bible. So questions like, is the Bible truly the Word of God, or it is just a figment of human beings? And that, how did we even arrive at getting our Bible today? Are there various versions of the Bible? And how did we even get that? And are they the same? Are they similar? Or they are different? In the month of March, we'll also be looking at the subject of black skepticism. I believe you've heard and seen that there is a new wave that is called the woke or black consciousness, the new form of Pan-Africanism, where they are hitting strongly that for Africa to advance, we must do away with everything called religion, particularly the Christian faith. Was Christianity carved by the white man in order to rule or manipulate the black man? Is it true that we have the Bible and in several churches doing the biddings of the white man? Is it even true that Christianity impedes growth or otherwise? Join me this and every Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. on the Voice of Reformation as we look at these subjects. We have able facilitators, the likes of Elder Emmanuel Emisa, Pastor Jacob Honey, Pastor Patrick, Mark Edu Boateng, and then Kafui Te. The good thing is also that the last Friday of every month, you get an opportunity to join in by bringing on board your questions so that we ask them for serious interactions. I believe that with all these interactions, the ultimate goal is that Ghana and by extension Africa will be liberated and saved. See ya. All right, you are all warmly welcome once again to today's session of the Voice of Reformation. This is the New African Concept, and then I'm your brother and friend Joshua Ponsafo. As we had already said, we are still within the season of apologetics, where we are taking various aspects of bordering questions on the subject of apologetics. This month of March, we will be considering what is called the black consciousness. When we talk of the black consciousness, we are talking of this new wave that has actually begun, which is very, very crucial and critical to especially Africa and then even the blacks in the diaspora, because it is calling for a need for change. And this particular month of March, we'll be doing justice to it. But there is one issue that has happened, or the elections by our dear brethren in Nigeria, which is very, very crucial. And because this month is dedicated for Black consciousness, we would like to use it as a starting point where we'll be discussing, various issues. So tonight we will be giving a brief overview of the Nigerian elections, and then most especially we will be extracting lessons, and then we will bring it into the Ghanaian context, and then where Africa is heading towards. you are at liberty to join in the conversation. Through your comments. Share your comments. You are not bound to agree with us or to agree with me on every point that is raised. The ultimate goal is for holistic national transformation. And as we know, Sebio Nyansa and Nasa Adrin, so it will take dialogue and then, perspectives and counter perspectives for us to arrive at the main deal so that we can, move on. It is my prayer that God will grant us these levels of understanding as we seek, to move on. Yeah, so on the 25th of February, we had our brethren in Nigeria going to the polls. And after the polls, there was the INEC, that happens to be the Electoral Commission, if we are to put it in the Ghanaian context, and that is EC. And then they processed all the results. And in the course or the early part of this week, they announced the winner and then the various categories of counts that each candidate had. Now, the goal is to look at these various stuffs and then ask ourselves very pressing questions or a number of pressing questions, so that I believe strongly that it will help us to make very sound judgments, especially now that we also in Ghana, we are heading towards, our election. Okay, so this is the country, Nigeria. It is estimated that Nigeria has a population of about more than 200 million. And that is why they are normally referred to as the giant of Africa. We normally call them the giant of Africa because they have a good number of people when it comes to population. And in reality, population plays a vital role in development. So it is a blessing or a curse, depending on how you intend using it. Some people have used it to their advantage, like China, like India. They have used their numbers to their advantage. Unfortunately, our brethren in Nigeria and by extension Africa, we've not been able to, drive it to our advantage. And once we have not driven it to advantageous use, it has now become almost like a curse. So this has about more than 200 million people. And for the polls that our brethren went, we had these, in fact, in all, there were about 18 people. We had 18 contestants, so you could see that it was a very hard contest. But we had about 3 to 4 of them more or less standing out. So something brief, especially with the 3, we have Bola Tinubu, who happens to be, as he's normally called, the Jagaban. He is a founding member, or he's actually the founding brain of the APC. I wouldn't want us to delve so deep. Yes, because of my focus tonight is not just in the discussion and his histories around it, but my focus tonight is more on the lessons. But this man happened to be, in fact, the founding brain, because all through it was PDP that was having their reign. And then he himself was coming from PDP, and then he organized himself or themselves so that they can overthrow PDP. So what he did was that he was not very popular at that time, or he was not having so much strength to win as of that time when they had to combat or contest Goodluck Jonathan. So what he did was that he allowed, Buhari, who happened to have a very good face in the light of Nigerians, to be the flag bearer, and then they won. And then now he feels that this is the time
for him to also show up. In fact, he was the one who brought, Professor Osibanjo, who happened to be the current vice president of Nigeria, who is a professor and then also a pastor at Redeemed. All these was or were his orchestration. That is the mind or the brain behind the APC and then all. We have, Abubakar Atiku, who also was the then vice president. He had been or he has served for 8 terms as a vice president, and then now he's also vying for the presidency. We have Peter Obi, a very strong character that came onto the scene. He's actually a star politician. He was also from PDP as well, and he was also the governor at one of the states, that has a number of states, and he also in the 2019 elections, he was the running mate for Atiku. And then we also have Kwankwaso. So these were 3 or 4 of the primary people. But mind you, as I said, they were about, 18. So to cut a long story short, from INEC, in fact, we all saw a number of videos. We saw the tensions that were in the system. We saw a bit of, brutalizations. We saw, some thugs also running away with some ballot boxes and then all. So, we have various like the PDP and then the Labour Party. They have made a move to declare it null and void. To them, it was not free and fair. And then they are making advancements and preparatory tenets to invade or, to cut. So what we are talking about tonight is based on the results as, proposed or given by INEC. Personally, I have my own doubts concerning how things went. But we are working with the figures as was given. So at the end of the election, we have Jagaban having 8.7 million. We have Atiku 6.9. We have Peter Obi 6.1. Let me just focus on the 3 because of the time. And then when it comes to the 6, they had 36 states, and then literally it was a hotly, contested thing, because you could see that all of them, or each of them, that is each of the 3 that I'm talking about, each of them had 12, 12, 12. But one thing is that unlike Ghana, for you to win the presidency, you must have 50% plus 1. Nigeria, theirs is not like that. It is by simple majority. Yeah, so it is not about getting 50% plus 1. The one or the contestant that or the presidential candidate that gets more or the highest number of votes wins, together with some adjoining conditions like getting about at least 25% at the local government and then all other stuff. Okay, so by distribution, these were it, and then state by state. My focus is more on how did Nigeria arrive at their current results. How did Nigeria arrive at their current results as we have now, where Tinubu now becomes the president-elect and then was able to garner almost 9 million or about 8.7 million votes, and then 6.9 for Atiku and then 6.1 for Peter Obi. We want to look at some of those dynamics. And then based on it, we then extract onto Ghana. We know that next year we will also be going to the polls. And what do we have in store for Ghanaians? And then most especially, we look at the future. What is the future of politics in Ghana, in Africa? I'm actually looking at the African context. I'm using Nigeria because they've done theirs. Then I'll bring it to Ghana because we are about doing ours. Then we have a sound discussion on the level of, at the African level. As I said, Nigeria have a wider scale of about more than 200 million, about 219, depending on the authority that you are using. In fact, some also go even as far as 300 million, depending on the sources that you are making reference to. Now, this is the point. Please, when you come on board, do well and then share. Let's share the links on our statuses so that people can also join in such conversations. And as you are following, you are also encouraged to comment so that we get to know what you also think of the whole subject matter and what we are talking about. Now, the problem with Africa is that we have three major issues, especially when it comes to democracy. I have been repeatedly saying when it comes to democracy, many people believe that democracy is not good for Africa. And the reason why they believe democracy is not good for Africa is that, after all, when we started using democracy, what have we seen? We have not seen any good thing. Those, like when you take Libya, when Gaddafi was around, the country was faring well. Was it democracy? No. It was more or less something like, in quote, benevolent autocracy. But it, at least, though it was not, democracy, it was moving well. When you take like communist China, it is not democracy, but now they are the second economic superpowers that is next to USA. When you take Singapore through Lee Kuan Yew, he was on the throne or the seat for about 39 good years. And then it gave him the luxury of time to be able to what? Put certain things in place before he left the scene. And then when you take even our own Rwanda, that happens to be a bit of an icon of Africa. Since, after the genocide in Rwanda in 94, that Paul Kagame came on board and then tried bringing them together. He has been there from 96 or so through till now. So you could see that when people look at these parameters, they are enjoined to draw the conclusion that democracy is not a good system of governance for us. But I've always been saying that the problem is not democracy itself. In fact, though democracy has its own issues, for instance, even Plato and then all, Socrates and then all, they had problems with democracy. Though their kind of democracy in the Greek around the time of the Greek Empire was quite different, but at least democracy as a concept, they had a bit of issues with it. Once it is, a human institution, you should know that it will not be, it wouldn't be free from issues. But the problem is that, democracy presents as the best available system of government. And this is the kind of argument that I want us to really understand. Democracy has its own limitations and issues. However, amongst the various available kinds, is it monarchy? Is it feudalism? Is it communism? Is it socialism? Is it, autocracy, totalitarianism? Just name it. None of them truly represents the corporate will or the sovereign will. We are not saying none of them can bring about levels of development, but we are saying that none of them represents the corporate sovereign will of the people than democracy, because democracy is the governance of the people, for the people, and by the people. Then the question becomes, if democracy is the available best form, why then is it not working for Africa? It is not working for Africa because the demands of democracy, we have failed to meet up to those responsibilities. The discussions, therefore, should not be whether or not we should throw away democracy, but the discussion should be, what are the ethical demands? What are the responsibilities? What are the requirements for the proper execution of democracy in the African context? And when we get to know, then we come to the second thing. To what extent are we willing to pay the price? To what extent are we willing to pay the price for that kind of of governance to have impact in Africa and then in Ghana? So this is a very, crucial thing that we are talking about. The three things that I'm now coming to Nigeria, and what is at work in Nigeria, by extension, has a role in Ghana and then even in Africa. Now, the three things are that voting, when democracy goes along one, tribal lines. Listen very carefully. Democracy is a system of government for the people, of the people, by the people. As I've always said, it means that there is a portfolio which is stronger and more potent than even the presidency in a democratic setting like Ghana, Nigeria, and in many African countries. And then that portfolio is the people. But when you have people, the people that are the harbingers, in fact, they are the custodians of democracy. When you have them voting along partisan lines, I started with tribal lines, then there's going to be a problem. One of the major problems of Nigeria is election around or along the lines of tribalism. So Peter Obi is an Igbo. Now the other guy from Yoruba, and these are age-long tensions that might be going on through. So people are willing to vote for their kinsmen, not because of the kind of tangible, expressive, ideas that they are bringing on board, but merely on the account that I am an Igbo, Obi is an Igbo, therefore let me go for him. I am a Yoruba, this guy is a Yoruba, therefore let me go for him. When you come to Ghana, we are not so much different. People in Ashanti region, that is the heartbeat of NPP. There are many constituencies in an Ashanti region that the truth of the matter is that their current MPs don't deserve to be there in any form. There are politicians that they don't even know what it means by the word policy, but he's a politician. Why? They have this assurance that as long as they win the primaries, for instance, Bantama, I am just looking forward to a time where a place like Bantama will be able to vote either an independent candidate or perhaps, let me say, maybe even NDC. That is, even if they find the NDC candidate more prudent and useful and having the potential to solve the problem or represent them well. Just imagine a place like Bantama voting MPP out and then bringing either NDC or an independent candidate to become the MP for Bantama. Places like Inshaeso and then all those kinds. So I am speaking now not to the leaders, I am speaking to the citizenry. I've always said that citizenship failure precedes, leadership failure. We are where we are today as Ghana, and we are where our brethren Nigeria, they are where they are because voting is along, we are building a democracy based on tribalism, and we will not go far. In the end, to me, and to our based on tribalism, then at the end of the day, we come and then we are complaining. And then our complaints are that the leaders are not helping us. The question is, from whence come these leaders? The leaders are coming from amongst us. And they did not come through military coup. They were not, they were not thrown onto us. They were not appointed, they were elected. And we chose them based on our values. And we'll be coming to the lessons where I'll be focusing much. So what am I driving at? What I'm driving at is the point that, one, what brought Nigeria, what gave them the kind of, victory that they had was the fact that the voting was along tribal lines. I'm not saying all of them. I'm talking of a good majority of them voted along tribal lines. And it is not different in Ghana. In Ghana, we are also committed. It is almost a known thing that in voter region, it is for NDC. It is almost a known thing that for Ashanti region, it is for MPP. My fellow Ghanaians, as our president usually says, the time has come that if we want to save Ghana and if we want to save Africa, we must delineate ourselves from the gravitational pull of tribalism. We are not saying that don't vote for your tribe man, but you only vote for your tribe man only on the condition that what he is bringing on board or amongst the available candidates, it is a proven fact beyond all reasonable doubt that this is the guy who holds the capacity and then the potential to drive the nation forward or represents the interest of the people. What I mean is, don't vote along blind tribal lines. This element has cost us as a people in Ghana, and then it has cost us even as blacks. And that is what our brethren in Nigeria also had. Now, apart from that, the second thing is to vote along religious lines. Religious lines. Now, in Ghana here, I must admit that this aspect is not so strong here. But in Nigeria, because of their religious, demographics, it plays a very strong, vital role. And because of a bit of religious tension in the system, or I'm talking of Nigeria, it plays vital role. So we are having one, tribalism, which played a vital role, and then two, religion. And then, in Nigeria, depending on the authority or the source that you use, we are having, it is chiefly an Islamic country together with also Christians. So it is almost at par, maybe with about plus or minus 5 to 7%, depending on the authority or the source that you subscribe to. You realize, as you can see, that, this is about 2018, 2019. You could see that the Muslim population as of that time was about 50%. And then we had the Christian population being about 40%. And then we had the indigenous or the other kinds of, religious belief system also falling about 10%. Now, because of the religious tension and then all, people are bound to vote along religious lines. So the second kind of voting that did not really help Nigerians was voting along religious lines. There is nothing wrong that I am a Christian and then I'm voting for a Christian. But what we are saying is that if you are voting for a Christian, then you should vote for a Christian on the account that that Christian is the best available candidate amongst the candidates that have been presented. If you are a Muslim, you are not to vote blindly that because I am a Muslim, I have to vote for a Muslim. No, if you are voting for a Muslim candidate, then it is on the grounds that this Muslim candidate, among all other things, he is the best available candidate in the context or in the race that, we are having. So that is the problem that we are having. Nigeria's issue, in fact, many people have been grieved by the kind of results that they had. And I'm telling you that one of the problems was the voting along tribal lines. Secondly, voting along religious lines. And then also, thirdly, voting along partisan lines. When you have a system where they are voting merely along partisan lines, there is going to be a problem. Until we don't finish doing this and then now we come and blame the leaders. The problem is with the citizenry. We must first arise and then we will be able to put the leaders right in their context. Our leaders are taking us for granted. They have actually taken us for granted. And the reason why they have taken us for granted is because we have failed to arise. And until we arise, they will keep on taking us for granted, because freedom is not given voluntarily by the oppressor. Freedom ought to be demanded by the oppressed. There is no way the oppressor who is, benefiting from your tears, from your ignorance, from your indifference. There is no way that, oppressor is going to give you freedom on a silver platter. You have to fight for it. And that is why I am passionate about the citizenry. Citizenship failure precedes leadership failure. Citizenship crisis precedes, leadership crisis. A very good friend of mine, Mark Edubuati, normally says that he's looking forward to a time where he can lead a demonstration. But the funny thing is that, though it looks funny or it sounds funny, but that is the truth. He's saying that this time he is not going to demonstrate against the leaders, he is going to demonstrate against the citizenry. Do you get the logic? We are to demonstrate this time not against leaders, but we are to demonstrate against the citizenry. Because the question is, where we are as a people, are we victims or we are culprits? And the truth of the matter is that we are first the culprits, and then we are also the victims. We are the architects of our own disaster. We have built this particular thing with our own self. But I have a particular thing that I say, that the day you know you are chief, the day you know you are chief, our leaders would keep on taking us for granted. Our religious leaders, our political leaders, our traditional leaders, our economic leaders, our cultural leaders, our academic leaders will keep on taking us for granted until we arise. I am speaking to the youth of Ghana. I am speaking to the youth of Nigeria. I am speaking to the youth of Africa, that we are the architects of tomorrow. We hold within our hands the destiny of our nation and beloved continent. And the time has come for us to go beyond just, tribalism. Let it be that our fathers have erred, but we will not repeat the same mistake. Our fathers erred along the line of what? Tribal loyalty. But we, the upcoming youth, we are not going to repeat the same mistake. Our fathers erred along the lines of, ethnic loyalty, but we are not going to fall for that, scam. Some of our fathers failed on the account of, unnecessary religious dogmatism and fundamentalism, religious fanatism. We are not going to repeat that same mistake, because it is expected that we must learn from the mistakes that our fathers and our forebears did, so that we can lay in corrective measures into the future. So the point is clear in this submission, that these are the three things that are really affecting us, especially with our practice of electionary democracy. When you have people who are ignorant, when you have people who are indifferent, who are unconcerned, we have many of the youth who were given tokens of money, and because of instant gratification, because they were thinking of what they will eat, what they will drive, they were thinking of themselves. Because of that, they were not thinking of tomorrow. And they were willing to take some amount of money in order to push certain agenda. They have not come to a point to place value on their thumb, on the vote that they have. They see it as normal. They see it as nominal. And many people are willing to sacrifice it. Many people are willing to sacrifice the destinies of themselves, the destinies of their children, the destinies of posterity, just for a bottle of wine, just for some amount of money, just for some trinkets, just for some, car. Why? Because they don't have value for their vote. They don't have value for the nation Nigeria. They don't have value for the nation of Ghana. They don't have value for the continent of Africa. People, it is about time that we arise. Now, what are the lessons that I want to extract? And that is the main thing that I want to talk about for tonight before we end the show today. As I said, when you come on board, do well and then register your presence with a comment or two. And as you follow whatever we are saying, let us also know what you think concerning the presentation and the content. If you have a different thought, you can also share it as well. We are interested in perspectives and counter perspectives as far as it is ultimately geared towards the transformation of Ghana and Africa. Then it is warmly welcome. Now, based on what we have shared, I'm repeating again that the three things that did not help this just ended Nigerian election was voting along tribal lines, voting along religious lines, and voting along partisan lines. When it comes to Ghana, we are not different. The only difference is that the religious lines don't seem to be very strong now. We don't know what tomorrow holds. But now in Ghana, it is more voting along tribal lines and then voting along partisan lines and a few, bits on religious lines. Now, what are the lessons? Maybe 5 things before I draw down the curtains of today's, presentation. The first point I want us to understand is that Africa is sitting on a ticking time bomb. I am not a prophet of doom. If there was anything different, I would have told you. I am only a researcher and then a critical analyst and observer. And I am telling you that based on the projections, based on respected projections, socio-political and then economic projections of the various countries in Africa, and based on the global trajectory of how things are going, if things continue this way without a change, then the truth is that the hope of Africa stands in the balance. I am telling you that I am not a prophet of doom, but I am telling you based on proven facts and figures. A typical example is that from Economic Outlook, they have actually proposed that by the year 2050, which is some few years away, we are going to have 80% of the world's poorest people are going to be in Africa. And out of that, 80% of poorest people in Africa, 40% out of these poorest people are going to be in Nigeria and Congo alone. And do you know what these statistics mean? Do you know what these demographics mean? You have no idea. So in the few years ahead, 80% of the world's poorest people are going to be in Africa. Already 18 out of 21, poorest countries in the world are located in Africa. And as long as you are poor, you are going to be a pawn, or you are going to be a puppet in the hands of the rich. No wonder Chinese can come and then do whatever they want here in Africa. No wonder the Western world, they have their hands in our throat. Why? Because we are on the begging element. As I speak, I mean, we have our beloved president and then the executive literally pleading for tax, a loan waiver from China, that China should cancel our debts. Is it not sad? For how long are we going to continue on this? As if that is not enough. You have Africa is the youthful or the youngest continent in the world. I'm giving you some of the things which we mean by saying that we are sitting on a ticking time bomb and we cannot continue business as usual. I would like to commend our brethren in Nigeria for at least, though most of the anticipation through Peter Obi was not realized, but still it has given a bit of an outlook and a perspective that that kind of mentality where it is APC, PDP, and we have always thought that it is always two giant parties that have a divine right and then a divine mandate to rule and govern the people against even their will, at least through the number of votes that Peter Obi was able to garner, about 6.1 million as against 6.9 for Atiku, and then about 8.7 for Tinubu. At least it has showcased that it is possible to topple them down. When you bring it to the context of Ghana, it is not different. This kind of awakening will send shivers into the spine of the dominant parties, MPP, NDC, so that whoever gets it, it will compel you to do the right thing, because at least a signal has been sent that for you to think that you are enjoying some divine monopoly, that monopoly is about breaking. Because when the people choose to arise, the consequence will become alarming. So if we are having projected wise more than 80% of the world's poorest people to be in Africa by 2050, and out of that about 40% are to be in Nigeria and Congo, then it is about time that we arise. Number two, Africa is the youngest continent. What it means is that we are the continent with the highest number of young people, or the youth. And this can be a golden opportunity, or it can be a curse to us, depending on how we utilize this. It can be a golden opportunity if we come together as the youth and then we commit ourselves to doing things right. Else, it will become a curse. When you have a high number of youthful population, then it is both a danger and then it is a blessing. And unfortunately, out of this high number of youthful population, majority, or we have a good number of them who are unemployed. When you put all these demographics together, then we are talking of a very dark future ahead. If we don't take care, sooner than later, Africa will be plunged in various chaos, various civil unrest, because the youth cannot bear it any longer. Just as we saw with the NSAS, these things are tiny presentations that when we get to the upper critical limit, the country or the nation and the continent cannot contain us. And by the time we realize, a lot of bloodshed, a lot of chaos, and even with that, it may not necessarily solve the question as we have it. So, some of the key lessons that we are trying to put across is that, one, we are in a critical juncture and that we must make good use of it. When we talk of a critical juncture is any phenomenon or anything that happens in the course of time that if it is well utilized, it can be for the advancement, or it can change history for good, whether positively or negatively. We call it a critical juncture. Now we must understand that the social media has provided, or it is a 21st century critical juncture, because majority of the youth happens to be there. Majority of the youth happens to be there. They happen to be on the social media. So, and the social media has given an opportunity where you can be speaking to thousands of people without even hosting them in a hall. Not just thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in fact, millions of people. So technology has made it easier for a swift passing on of information to a wider number of people within the shortest possible time. Now, this can be an advantage or a disadvantage based on the perspective that you are coming from. But be it as it may, it is a critical juncture. It can be used to turn the wheels of history of Ghana and Africa, or that is either positively or negatively. My charge tonight is that I came actually purposely for the youth. With this presentation, I am speaking to the citizenry, but purposely to the youth, that if we are to make good use of technology, from LinkedIn to Twitter to Facebook to YouTube to TikTok, the various platforms available, we must be deliberate enough to use it as a vessel to bring about a radical shift in the minds of our people. And you'll be surprised the extent to which things will change. So we have that. The second thing is that there is a wave of social change. If you have not noticed it, it is gradually blowing. Places like Mozambique, places like Zambia, there are people who came, like I think is in Mozambique or so. One, he is a man of God. He has nothing to do with politics. He came onto the scene and then he was able to defeat the long-standing people. Zambia to the same thing. The guy just comes on board from nowhere and then pushes all those kind of people down. Unfortunately, Peter Obi wasn't able to reach that zenith with this election, but at least there has been a mindset that has been thrown that it is possible that these so-called invincible forces, it is possible to topple them down. There is a social wave of change that is blowing across Africa. And then we must align ourselves, especially the people of Ghana and especially the youth of Africa. We must align ourselves. We must not choose to repeat the errors and then the mistakes of our forefathers and then our fathers as they did it. Number three is that the youth presents as the kingmakers of most African countries. What I mean is the destiny of Ghana is in the hands of the youth. The destiny of Nigeria is in the hands of the youth. The destiny of Africa is in the hands of the youth. We are the kingmakers. We are the kingmakers. We cannot afford to sell our conscience. And when we finish, the youth, we will now come and then we'll be crying that there are no jobs. We'll be crying that there are no opportunities. But when election time comes, we allow ourselves to be manipulated by some figures because of our little money that we will be receiving. And what makes it worse is the educated illiterates. When I talk of educated illiterates, I am talking about those who have been to school, at least our mothers and then our grandmothers who don't really understand some of these dynamics, we can pardon them a bit. That is why we must go down to the grassroots, to the villages. We must hold community-based campaigns, community-based discussions, and then raise. That is the burden of democracy. You cannot have democracy properly running without effectively raising the understanding of the citizenry on the subject or of the machinery of what? Of governance. So we must allow this message to get to, and very soon we'll be having these sessions, some of these sessions in our local dialects, having community-based discussions. Say the beya ye mame nom ne ye pepa nom ne ye wofa nom ne ye nana nom omo betimi atiase. Say the time has come. I am rather having pain when I see people who have been to school, graduates, who can read and write, who can read in between the lines. And these guys are being partisan. And these guys are being tribalistic. You can have a whole professor who is being tribalistic. A professor that it is expected of you to read in between the lines and then to speak as an elite, riding on your influence to raise the minds of the populace to a more, understanding level. We have professors, we have PhD holders, we have lecturers, doctors. I get close to some of these people, and then the kind of comments they give, excuse my language, as though they have not set their feet in a classroom. The essence of education is to stimulate or help us to think. Unfortunately, the kind of education we have here, oh, it is just pathetic. It rather looks like the more the black man is educated, the more ignorant he becomes. But I am speaking to my fellow youth. We are the kingmakers. So we don't blame the king for his irresponsibility. We blame the makers of the king. We choose the king. Ghana here, we have more than 65 to 70% of our population being the youth. It means that every election that has happened in Ghana, majority of the voting population happen to be the youth. So we, the youth, we have decided the destiny of Ghana by committing the machinery of leadership into all those kinds of leaders we have had since Nkrumah till date. Enti oman no ne daache no ejina eye imabunu no so. When you go to Nigeria, the demographics also favors the youth. But while some of the youth are thinking straight, trying to get a person who can what? Who can drive the nation forward, you then also have another section of the youth thinking on religion, thinking on tribalism, thinking on partisanship, and then based on certain money and then, certain juicy packages that have been given them, they are rather voting off their conscience. May God have mercy on us. In Africa, it is also the same thing. The entirety of Africa, we are getting to about 1.3 to about 1.4 billion people in Africa, of the 54 countries in Africa. This is a huge number of people. But out of these people, majority, about almost 60 to 70% of the entirety of Africa happens to be the youth. That is the good news. What it means is that if the youth are to come together, I don't have to travel all the way to Nigeria physically. I can be here and then I can connect through the power of the social media and through the power of technology. And this is the time that we must start having what? African Youth Caucus, Ghana Youth Caucus, Nigeria Youth Caucus, where there must be what? Exchange of ideas, breaking artificial barriers. Let us use the power of technology to our advantage as the youth. So we are the kingmakers, and we don't blame the king. We blame ourselves. If we can start thinking right and start organizing ourselves to be a mighty force, there will be no system. be it religious system, be it, political cabals, be it, economic cartels. There is no institution that will be able to break the power of a united youth. We have the numbers to our advantage, and then majority of these youth have a leverage of a level of enlightenment. What we have to do is to give ourselves a reorientation of proper value systems, and I can assure you, positive things are going to happen. My last but one point is that the church must now have open-mindedness and then start getting used or start getting involved in nation building issues. Very, very important. The church must desist from just focusing herself in building cathedrals. In fact, you are not successful until your success is connected to the overall liberation and advancement of the society. How can a church call herself a thriving church in a society that is woefully ignorant, a society that is morally depraved, a society that is battling with high numbers of unemployment, educated unemployed youth, a society that is buffeted with flooding problems, insecurity problems, and all these problems, unemployment, and then just name it. And then we think we are being successful because we are building large cathedrals. We think we are being successful because we have 200 branches, 100 branches of our denominations. No. The next lesson that we must take is that it is about time that the church now begins to involve herself in nation building discourses or discussions. Kudos to some of the mainstream churches in Nigeria, at least, because Nigeria is heading towards a tensional element. And we saw some of the churches speaking up, some of the fathers speaking up. That is how things should be. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil, and God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. Very, very important. And then as we end, the other point is that we must start focusing on value system reorientation rather than looking on the messianic leader mentality. And for us at New African Concept, this is what we have been saying over and over again. In a democratic setting, we have said over and over again that in true democracy, the strength of democracy rides on the shoulders of the masses, the citizenry, the people. We are the custodians of democracy, not the leaders. And if this is the case, then what it means is interpretive, meaning is that the time has come for us to look at reorienting ourselves by way of our value systems. Leadership is only a catalyst. Leadership in democracy is a catalyst. And we don't fold our arms and then just looking into the sky and praying and hoping that God should bring us, a messianic leader who will take us to the promised land. For instance, Peter Obi presents us more or less, many of the Nigerian youth saw him as the savior. The question that I'm posing is that, unfortunately, now that he couldn't get it, he has gone to court. We are following what it will be, but I'm giving based on the immediate context. The question is, what next? The difference is that, say the two year dream say, kopim say yebenya leader neni da honom no oman no entimi nkoso a. That is the fallacy, or that is the problem in the logic of thinking. When you begin to think that it is all about say yebenya leader neni da ho, what it means is that the church or everybody, we are just praying. Oh, yeah, bompaye, ude yeah bompaye, ude yeah bompaye. Said the beya yankopon bi tie sufre na wa maye. I mean, Peter Obi, and I say Ajinkwan or they ever call the promised land. Now, if that Ajinkwan couldn't get it, now people are pushing for a third force, even in Ghana. Currently, we have GUM in the previous elections or the just ended elections. We had, I mean, GUM featuring as the third force, and we know that we'll be having other people that will also surface in the upcoming elections. Yeah, so you could see that we had our current president, that is True MPP, having about 51.3%. We had John Mahama, that is 47. And then now we had the third was GUM, who couldn't even get up to 1% of the votes. He had about 0.8. But currently he is our third force. So what it means is that at least we know that there are people like Kofi Krantin who are also, I mean, making waves and then trying to come onto the scene and then all. But the issue is that it takes a lot of effort to come on as a third force. But the good news is MPP, NDC, they are not invincible. PDP, APC, they are not invincible. It is a possibility that they can be toppled down with a more intense strategy. Whoever has a better or a stronger, I mean, strategy will be able to win for that day. So the lesson should be clear at this point as we are drawing down the curtains of today's session, that we are the kingmakers and that we must focus on value system. I'm speaking this to my Nigerian brethren, that the kind of energy that was brought together during the election time or leading up to the election and then during the election time, the intensity and then the energy that was brought together with the mindset of pushing, I mean, Peter Obi to the presidency. Do not let it die. The problem, you see, that is the difference. When you begin to think that, and this happens even with people who want to even come on board as third parties or third forces. I have met a number of them, or a few of them, had discourses and discussions with them, and then the failure in their thinking or logic is that until they seize power, until they get power, there is nothing that they can do. And I tell them that it is not true. It is true that if you become the president, there are various levels of transformation that you can bring on board because of the executive power that you have been given. However, you can start wherever you are. If you want to come on board as a viable third force, don't just fold your arms and then show up during election time or election year and then say that, oh, MPP, NDC, also Munyade, they have failed us for all these years, so vote for me. No. Leading up to what? Show working, show some tangible steps, mobilize the youth, start creating jobs, have mentorship sessions. Said the beya, people can see, especially the youth can see a ray of hope. If you stand in the context like our father, I mean, Peter Obi, who stood and unfortunately couldn't get the representation enough to win. You don't go to rest and then count the days for the next 4 years to come on board. No, you already have the clout. You already have the fever. You already have the following. You already have the backing. What you have to do is that ride on this backing, ride on this fever, and then be holding sessions with the youth. Organize the diaspora to that effect, and then see the kind of transformation that can start happening. This is what, so if you say that you believe in a new Nigeria, and then unfortunately you couldn't even get it, you can start doing something based on the mobilization that you have now. And in Ghana, it is the same thing. Wherever we are, we shouldn't fold our arms saying that unless I also become a president, there is nothing you can do. There are several stars that can be done. In fact, even the madman, there is something he can do. Each and every one of us, we have things to contribute in order to make our nation great and strong. In summary, our brothers, Nigerians, have had their elections. It was largely peaceful with some few tensions here and there, and then some tax worrying, putting in some worries. INEC have put across the presidential elect to be Tinubu. The other aggrieved PDP and the Labour Party, they have tendered in to the court. We are hoping that everything will go peacefully. Now, the errors or the limitations or the mistakes that was employed in the voting patterns of Nigeria were three. Voting merely along religious lines. I'm using merely because it is not wrong that a Christian will vote for a Christian, neither is it wrong for a Muslim to vote for a Muslim. But rather, the issue is when you are voting for the person just because he is also part of my religion, not interested in the person's philosophies, ideologies, and points that he is bringing on board. Many people in Nigeria unfortunately voted merely along religious lines. Number two, voting merely along tribal lines. And number three, voting merely along partisan lines. It has that same effect in Ghana. As we go to the polls next year, please, the youth, we must desist from voting merely along partisan lines, merely along tribal and ethnic lines, and merely along religious lines, so that the woes or what has happened to Nigeria will not repeat itself for us. And then I also came in with the mindset that it is very prudent that we understand these 5 things. I gave the preamble that Ghana and Africa, we are sitting on a ticking time bomb, because we are the continent with the largest number of, poor people, the largest number of unemployed people, and then the largest number of, or the highest number of the youth. We can use it to our advantage, but if things continue this way, then there could be a lot of, chaos and civil unrest and then bloodshed that could happen along the line. But for this cause came we here, that will be committed to doing something much more positive so that we wouldn't have to get there. Now, we said that, one, we have a critical juncture in Africa. Critical junctures are specific, periodic, incidences and phenomena that do happen along the line, and if it is well utilized, can change the course of history, either for good or for bad, depending on how it is utilized. One of the critical junctures in Africa today is technology, especially the social media. It is a potent force and weapon that we can use to our advantage, or other people can also use to their advantage, which will also be to our disadvantage. So it is a context, and whoever uses it to his advantage will win the day. Again, we also said that there is a new wave of social change. At least Mozambique, it has happened there. Zambia, it has happened there. Nigeria, it almost happened, though it couldn't happen, but the wave has been created, which shows that those mentality of invincible two parties always dominating, it has been toppled down in Zambia, it has been toppled down in Mozambique, it was nearly toppled down in Nigeria, though it couldn't achieve, but the wave has been caused. And I mean, Ghana, we must begin to see that this MPP NDC, we can only keep them in power to the extent to which they are doing the right thing, else they have no business being there. And number three, we said that the good news is that we, that is the youth, we are the kingmakers. You don't blame the king for his irresponsibility when you are the kingmaker and you have the opportunity to take him off and bring a more reasonable and committed and selfless, king. So the problem is with the kingmakers, not the king. The problem is with the citizenry, not the leaders. Yes, the leaders have problems, but a greater problem is with we, the citizenry, particularly the youth, because we hold the destiny of Africa and then Ghana in our hands. And then number four, we said that it is about time that the church gets her adjustments right. We must move away from just focusing on just winning souls and then hosting them in big cathedrals and singing praises and worship and drama and choreography and stuff like that. There is fire on the mountain. The church, through her systems and platforms and influence and pulpit, must begin and taking frontline seats as far as societal reforms and transformations are also concerned. And then finally, we said that we must take our minds away from just folding our hands and looking out for messianic leaders to drop. When such messianic leaders, the likes of Peter Obi and co, come in, hallelujah, because at least they will catalyze, help fast track the process. That is, if only they deliver based on their promises that they are saying. But the main deal is that it takes you and I. And we can start wherever we are. And we can build ourselves together. My fellow Ghanaians, especially the youth, we have a greater tomorrow. My fellow youth in Africa, let us ride on the power of technology and start having serious discussions among ourselves. Breaking the invincible forces. Let us not repeat the errors and mistakes of our fathers and forebears. And let us not always be blaming them. This is the time. We see a new tomorrow. And if we will start having these discussions, and youth organizations, youth bodies, churches, we can start asking ourselves, what can we do or what can be done in our little small way to advance the society forward, rather than just relying on the government to do everything. We'll be able to we'll be able to have a great nation called Ghana, and then we'll be able to have a great continent called Africa. God richly bless you for joining in. Please, anytime you get opportunity to listen to it, you can leave your comment. We'll be monitoring. And then if you have any question whatsoever, you can also bring it on board. As I sign off, what I will say is that I'm tendering in this appeal of invitation to you. This is the New African concept. We are committed to holistic national transformation. We see a new tomorrow, both in Ghana and Africa, and then even among the Black communities in the diaspora. I will beseech you to come on board. Join this fever. Join this movement. Because the task is beyond the weight of one man or one institution or one organization. You may be a church, you may be a school, you may be a person. Come on board. Give your, you can share it as a comment. Leave a comment. We will track you. We will have further discussions with you so that we can see how we can partner and team up to make our nation great and strong. God bless our homeland Ghana and make her great and strong. God bless Africa. And Africa is the continent of the future. Africa is the hope of the world. And Africa is the hope of the gospel. As we always say, we have a world to shake. We have a continent that is Africa to liberate. We have a nation that is Ghana to save. And most definitely, we have the church to reform. Stay blessed and catch you next week, still on the Voice of Reformation.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Hi, I'm Joshua Ponsafo of the New African Concept. I believe strongly that you've been blessed so far with the various episodes of the Voice of Reformation. And I'm very much excited to inform you that with the next 3 months ahead, February, March, and then April, there is a special package in the area of apologetics. I know you have several questions on your mind, and so do I. For the month of February, we'll be considering the subject area of the Bible. So questions like, is the Bible truly the Word of God, or it is just a figment of human beings? And that, how did we even arrive at getting our Bible today? Are there various versions of the Bible? And how did we even get that? And are they the same? Are they similar? Or they are different? In the month of March, we'll also be looking at the subject of black skepticism. I believe you've heard and seen that there is a new wave that is called the woke or black consciousness, the new form of Pan-Africanism, where they are hitting strongly that for Africa to advance, we must do away with everything called religion, particularly the Christian faith. Was Christianity carved by the white man in order to rule or manipulate the black man? Is it true that we have the Bible and in several churches doing the biddings of the white man? Is it even true that Christianity impedes growth or otherwise? Join me this and every Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. on the Voice of Reformation as we look at these subjects. We have able facilitators, the likes of Elder Emmanuel Emisa, Pastor Jacob Honey, Pastor Patrick, Mark Edu Boateng, and then Kafui Tay. The good thing is also that the last Friday of every month, you get an opportunity to join in by bringing on board your questions so that we ask them for serious interactions. I believe that with all these interactions, the ultimate goal is that Ghana and by extension Africa will be liberated and saved. See ya.